Welcome to a new program of better automated acceptance testing using Serenity BDD and the screenplay pattern. I'm John Ferguson Smart, and today we'll be looking at a very important aspect of screenplay called the abilities. In a nutshell, what we'll be learning today is what abilities are, what they are to screenplay, what their role is, what you can do with them. We'll be looking at what abilities come bundled with screenplay, and also what you can use to how you can write your own abilities. Why would you want to write your own abilities, more importantly? In screenplay, we like to think in terms of actors. So it's a little bit like in a play at the theatre. In a play, an actor might need to be able to recite lines, or an actor might need to be able to sing or to dance. And different actors have different abilities to help them fulfill different roles. You might have one actor who's very good at singing in an opera, whereas another is more specialised in playing folk tunes. Each actor can use these different abilities to achieve different goals. In screenplay, we have something similar. Abilities are a way of encapsulating the logic that you need to interact with the system under test. In other words, abilities help you get the job done. Abilities are what enable you to actually perform a task. As we've seen previously, we have the model where we have an actor who has goals. The actor performs tasks to achieve those goals, and as part of those tasks, the actor is going to have to interact with the system. But in most cases, we're going to use some sort of tool to interact with the system. If it's a web test, we might use WebDriver. If we're interacting with a REST service, a web service, we might use some sort of REST API, and so forth. Screenplay encapsulates this logic in this sort of idea of abilities so that you can make it more easy to separate and reuse the code that you use to access different parts of the system. And this helps us make the actors more simpler and more focused. Here's an example. This is a common example of what we typically do in screenplay. Here we have a Serenity test that you've seen before. The new thing that we haven't seen before is that we're using a WebDriver variable called Pete's browser. Now, WebDriver, if you haven't used WebDriver, it's an API, a library that we use for testing web pages, for testing web applications. And the WebDriver object gives us access to a browser, opens up a browser and lets us automate and manipulate that browser. So Pete's our user, and Pete has the ability to browse the web. So notice we haven't said Pete.setDriver Pete's browser, where instead we're saying Pete can browse the web with Pete's driver. So you notice we haven't said Pete set driver Pete's driver. Pete doesn't have a WebDriver attribute, and this is intentional. Pete is not nailed down to only having to interact with web systems, or maybe he doesn't want to. Maybe there are some tests where he doesn't actually interact with web application. Maybe he only interacts with web services sometimes. Pete only uses the abilities that he needs for a particular job, and in this case he needs to go through a WebDriver browser. He performs his interaction, so he can open a browser on a page, he can enter values into a field, and he can check that the title of the page is what he expects. And each time he does one of these interactions, the interaction will use his browser to get the job done. Now, this is really powerful because what it means is that Pete can have one browser, but we might have Anna, another actor, who has a different browser. So if we were testing some sort of workflow application, we could have Pete submitting tasks into the workflow in his browser and Anna picking up those tasks in her browser in the same test. This is really, really powerful stuff. So in a nutshell, what have we got? We've got Pete the actor. Pete has an ability, browse the web. Now the ability is kind of like a toolbox. Everything we need to access a browser is stuck into that toolbox. And the browse the web ability gives Pete his own browser in this, but it's isolated and configurable and reusable inside this toolbox called browse the web. So as we've seen, abilities are quite commonly used for web testing. It's a very powerful pattern for testing web applications, but that's not the only one. We also use it to test, to access web services, to go through back-end systems, to speed up tests by not having to go through the web pages, UI each time. That's a great way of making a test run faster. And a third scenario, which is very, very common, is interacting with the backend. So that could be interacting with a web service to inject test data. It could be injecting data directly into a database. It could be uploading files into a batch file processing system. It could be any number of things. We can encapsulate these different bits of specific logic in different abilities and give these abilities to different actors in our test platform. Here's a test from our sample project. In this test, we have Petra who wants to check in her pet cat Ginger into the hotel. Unfortunately, the hotel already has 20 guests, so Ginger goes on the waiting list. Now that's not what I want to focus here. What I want to focus on here is the part where we're setting up the hotel, the part where we say a pet hotel with 20 pets checked in. Now this is fine if we've just got an object, and you know and I know that this hotel object is in fact just an ordinary Java object, and there's no reason why we can't do it this way. But imagine this is a real application. Imagine that the pet hotel was managed via a set of microservices, and that we need to use those microservices to set up the hotel with 20 guests. Or maybe we have to go through a web application. Or maybe we have direct access to the database so that we can inject data directly into the hotel guest list. The point is, for a real application, adding 20 guests to the hotel will most likely not be as simple as simply using a builder. More likely, we'll need to interact with the backend in some way. Imagine if we had another actor, say Harry the hotel manager, and Harry's job is to set up our 20 guests. We don't really care how he does it, we just want him to take care of it. So we could say, in addition to Petra, the pet owner, we could have actor Harry, the hotel manager. So Harry needs to be able to manage our hotel and book in guests. So we might say something like this. Harry can manage. We've got a couple of other manage methods, but this time we want him to manage the hotel. So we're going to say manage the pet hotel. And we'll notice that doesn't actually work yet because this method doesn't exist for pet hotel. Now, manage the pet hotel needs to return an ability. Harry Ken is going to take the ability to do something. So what I want to do here is create a method. So I'm going to create a method and I'm going to give it an ability. And it's manage the pet hotel. We're going to create a new ability called manage the hotel. And we'll specify what hotel we want. Now let's create this class. I'm going to create the manage the hotel class. It's going to have a pet hotel that it can manage. I'm going to create a field for that. Now we have the ability and Harry can manage the pet hotel. Next, I want to replace this line with Harry injecting this data, doing it through a web service or whatever comes in handy. So we could say something like Harry was able to, and I just so happen to have pre-prepared a little task for us called fill the hotel. We'll have a look at it. It's similar to what we've already seen. Fill the hotel with 20 cats. And hopefully this will replace the original builder that we had. Let's go and have a look at what I've done for these. Now it's not complete. The only bits that are done are the bits that we've already looked at in previous lessons. So here we have fill the hotel, which implements a task. And we can see that if we have fill the hotel.with, it's actually a builder. It's going to call a fill the hotel builder. Fill the hotel builder with a number of pets. and we can do either cats or dogs. It will fill the hotel with a number of pets and a breed, which can be either cat or dog. Let's go back to our actual fill the hotel. Where does this actually do something interesting? It's in the perform as method. Now we just have a very boring for loop. We create a new pet, and then here's the interesting bit. We need to be able to inject the pet into the hotel. We need to be able to book the pet into the hotel, but this time using the ability. So let's see how we do that. Now to get an ability from an actor, we go actor using ability to. So actor, who is using his ability to and manage the hotel. So this will retrieve the manage the hotel ability that has been associated with Harry, our actor. Next we need to make the ability do something. For the moment the ability hasn't got any powers. It's a bit of a poor ability. We can't actually do anything. So what we need to do is give it some sort of method that will actually do the dirty work of injecting the pet into the hotel using a data injection mechanism, web service data, a JDBC, whatever. Let's say we want to write something like check in pet, and here we can create this method. We're checking in the pet, and in reality all we need to do is to check in the pet. Now in a real application you'd be calling a web service there or doing something more complicated, but in our case it's relatively simple. Now let's remove this line and let's go revise what we've actually done here. If we go back to our original test, we have, let's put a given there to make it more clear what's going on. We have given that Harry was able to fill the hotel. When Petra checks in Ginger, then Petra should see that the registered guest list does not have an item Ginger and the waiting list does. So in other words, Ginger is on the waiting list. So what we've done here is basically replaced adding the hotel manually, injecting the cats into the hotel manually through a builder function, with delegating it to an ability. So Harry has an ability to delegate to manage the hotel guest list, and all of the details about how that happens are delegated to the fill the hotel. So that means any actor can manage the hotel list, but not all actors have to. We don't have to have the logic for fill the hotel inside our actors. In fact, our actors are not special at all. They're just generic Serenity actors which come out of the package, so that we haven't had to change them at all, and yet we've given them abilities to do things that are not out of the box. That in a nutshell is what's so great about abilities. It lets us give powers and abilities to our actors that they don't have out of the box without actually changing them, without actually extending or modifying the code. And that is hugely powerful for maintenance, hugely powerful for making the code more scalable, more reliable, and more extensible. We can also use abilities with questions. In this test, we check the registered guest in the hotel using the pet hotel object, and likewise we check the guest on the waiting list with the pet hotel object directly. But imagine if we couldn't do that. Imagine if we had to go through a web service or a backend API to be able to check those numbers. Or imagine if we wanted to go through a web service because we didn't want to go through the UI, and if we had to use this approach, maybe we'd have to go through a UI. We could do that. Questions can use abilities too. What we could do is structure our questions not to use the pet hotel directly, the way we're doing it here, but to use the manage the hotel ability instead. We could have something that looks like this. So rather than Petra, we could have Harry. We could write something like this. Harry should see that the guests registered in the hotel doesn't have Ginger. So of course we're going to need to create a guests class. So I'm going to create that class. It's going to be in the questions package because it's going to be a questions. And it is going to basically be a builder. Let's build this method. And here we have it. It's a questions and it is going to return a list of pets, just like the other one. Let's return a new question object. To get an actor's ability, we use the using ability to method. So actor using ability to, and we're going to pass in the ability that we're interested in. So we are interested in manage the hotel. And what does manage the hotel let us do? It lets us at the moment check in a pet. But what we'd really like is something like get registered pets. And let's add this to our ability. Now, one thing we need to remember is ability's job is to provide a number of related services around a particular area or domain. In this case, it's managing the hotel. So we're enabling checking in the pet. We can get registered pets, and we're going to also want to get the waiting list later on as well. But we don't want anything totally unrelated, and we could very well set up a separate ability for managing registered pets or getting the waiting list if different actors would need to do that separately. An interesting thing here is that a question is a single method class. So IntelliJ will actually propose, if we're lucky, to transform this into a lambda. So let's see how we can do that. If we just say replace with lambda, we're going to get a nice little lambda expression that does exactly the same thing. Actor, such that actor using ability to manage the hotel, get registered pets, and that's it. There we have it. Now let's add another ability. Let's do, instead of seeing that the guest registered in the hotel, see that the guests on the waiting list, and we'll make sure that Ginger is actually on the waiting list. So we'll have something similar. The guest on the waiting list is going to be the same sort of thing. We're going to have a list of pets. And we're going to say something like actor such that actor using ability to manage the hotel. And we're going to get waiting list. We're going to need to say manage the hotel.class. That's a class. Then we can simply create this method. And we're going to return pet hotel get waiting list. And that is all we need to do. So what we've done here is we have a ability which returns related functions. So it lets you check in a pet, get the registered pets, and get the waiting list. So all the key functions of the hotel, which you could imagine might be in the same microservice on your application server. And here in our questions, we have a similar, fairly concise notation. Registered in the hotel simply returns a question where we have the ability, manage the hotel, and then that enables us to get the registered pets and to get the waiting list. And here we have our test. See that the guest registered in the hotel does not have the item Ginger, and waiting on the waiting list has the item Ginger. And you'll notice we haven't mentioned the pet hotel because the pet hotel is being referred to in the ability. We could have different actors managing different hotels, for example, if we wanted to. We could have transfers between hotels. We could have quite more sophisticated setups than if we just have a single hotel variable. That makes the test a lot more flexible and a lot more extensible. So that's all from me this time. So this is John Smart signing out until next time.